Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, just a couple of quick announcements here. I think I've isolated what that odd thudding was in the video yesterday. So let me know if it's still there. If you are listening to this one again today in the comments, I really appreciate that. The second thing is I've got a lot of new kind of updated information, I think, about spring at the end of this. So if you don't really care about the near-term weather, just zip along the bottom there and get to the last a little bit where I start discussing some of the things I think are going to change for spring. I'm still building my ideas here. I'll kind of refine them over the next couple of days as I finally get back home, and we'll see what's going on. But the map you've been looking at while I've been talking here is our year-to-date precipitation ranks. And one of the, I think, things that I'm most concerned about going forward is just the northern plains being completely left out of the flow, not returning much snow. And even though there is some coming in the very near term and some rain out ahead of it, this has been a pretty devastating season across the northern tier of the United States in terms of just not being able to get the snow in place. Now, I understand that if you're in the northern tier of the U.S. and the Canadian Prairie, winter lasts clear through April. So that means we have to continue to watch the pattern to see if it evolves in a way that delivers moisture to this area. But that's one spot I'm keeping a very close eye on. Secondly, if you notice, there's this kind of section here of our southeast coast through the Carolinas that has been very dry as well. And we've talked a lot about Texas, western Texas, picking up strong winds, very low humidity levels, and dry conditions. So we just need to continue to monitor these things as we emerge from winter and see how things are shaping up for spring. But I spent some time just looking back at the last week or so at total accumulated precipitation. And we look at, the West Coast especially getting hit by those two very large systems. And there are still another couple of rounds coming through. I'll show you those in a few moments. But the map is just staggering how much rainfall has hit parts of California in the last 7 days, and the snow that's added up in the Sierra Nevada. In some places here topping easily, 6 to 8 feet of additional snow here. And it's just a reminder for those of you that aren't or haven't been out in the West or ever seen this forecast. This is often how it happens in the West. They get their entire, helping of precipitation for the year, usually in a couple of very, very large events. And this was one of those this year. But taking a look around the rest of the country here, I did want to bring you up to speed on some of the maps we're just continuing to watch and monitor. The first one is your latest root zone soil moisture map. And what was important for me to see in this map is, again, we're kind of identifying those areas that still need to have more moisture put into the soil, now through the spring. And not to just isolate specific areas, but I want to talk about parts of Iowa. We do have sections of Iowa that over the last 4 years are up to 48 inches. There's a spot in western Iowa that's 48 inches in deficit in the last 48 months. And we look here at this northern section of Iowa getting into Wisconsin. Even though there was a lot of snow on this part of the ground recently, it didn't seem to increase the deeper soil moisture number. So I'm just watching these areas carefully throughout the country, and just want to mention them piecemeal throughout each one of these videos. Looking at the river, just to bring up to speed on that, it is the Mississippi at Memphis is 22, almost 23 feet above low stage. So a lot of the recent precipitation finally, getting into the river and continue to keep it quite high. As we discussed, we still expect this to bounce, but continue to move its way, either sideways or up a bit as we approach spring. But I want to talk about snow for a minute, all right? Because one of my favorite websites, this is from Rutgers University, it's their snow lab. So if you just Google Rutgers Snow Lab, you'll find this. And what I've done for us here is I've put a map up that they create that looks at the January 2024 Northern Hemisphere departure from average or climatology. And they derived that from 1981 to 2010. And now what I was thinking about here is just a few places around the world where snowpack is incredibly important to the water resources. Now you're going, well, why is this all white in through here? Well, okay, this is the plus or minus 5%. We've got lots and lots of snow cover in this area. But when you have a really close look at this, I'm trying to see, look at this section of the northern plains of the United States. And then recently, in the month of February, we've watched this increase in the west. But taking a look throughout Europe, coming into parts of China, for example, coming out of sections here of Asia right into this area, Kazakhstan and south, it's just important to kind of see where the mountains are loading up, because that is ultimately the spring moisture source and summer moisture source for a lot of places around the world that do irrigation. Now, I'm not an expert in weather on this side of the planet. I don't spend much time studying that, but I want to just bring this up to your view so you can kind of see what it looks like. And go visit the site. It's a great one. So, keeping on this theme of snow, I want to show you what's changed in the West. This was January 5th. We're looking at the snow water equivalent map. And if I just flip this over to February 5th, look at the changes we've seen. Now, this is fantastic. Seeing these numbers in California up here in the 70 to 80% range. Notice a lot of the watershed for the Colorado River. Fantastic looking numbers. And again, that area that I'm most concerned about is just here across parts of Washington, Idaho, and Montana. This is the area that we've got to get more polar jet influence at some point before we get into March in April to really revive late season snowpack, just thinking purely about what's going to happen with the reservoirs in the Northwest and what we need to have in terms of snowpack built up for spring and summer. But very quickly on the topic of snow, I do want to take you across the world. I want to go back over to the Alps. I saw an interesting study released yesterday pointing at some data for the Alps and how much snow is in the Alps. Now, I've heard it's been a pretty phenomenal ski season, but if you compare the snow extent in the Alps, the very mild conditions that have been across Europe at times this winter has really limited where that heaviest snow is. And so this was just a view on February 3rd, a good clear view of the Alps. And just to show you what it looked like a year ago, quite extensive. So look at, kind of go back and forth here. This is this year versus last year, a whole lot more snow there. So just something to be considering because, again, the snow that melts out of these mountains is critical for agriculture in Southern Europe. All right, from there, I just wanted to point out, we're going to go through another very mild week throughout most of Europe. But the reason why it's cold from Greenland into Scandinavia is because this is where the stratospheric polar vortex is currently sitting. We also have a tropospheric vortex here as well, keeping things pretty cold. But outside of that, you look around most of the rest of the world, and we've got quite a bit of mild air in place right now. And again, we know that a lot of this has been promoted by very mild ocean temperatures compared to average from El Nino. The Atlantic is quite warm as well. And we've lost the strong signal of the Indian Ocean dipole, which had really kind of split the temperature pattern across the Indian Ocean. So these are the factors that are controlling this next 10-day time period. Okay, from there, this is a pretty amazing map just to think about here. It's February 7th, and this is what the European model started with today in terms of snow depth. And just to see such a broad section of the United States without snow, the Canadian prairie without snow. I mean, this is coming clear up into parts of Alberta. This is just an area that's really, not had it. Polar jet's not been there. I do want to apologize. I kind of chose not to cover in depth the huge snowstorms that have gone through parts of the Canadian Maritimes, specifically, Nova Scotia was hit pretty hard. This whole region and through here recently had a pretty massive snow event. I was kind of more focused on the big system in the West, and I do want to apologize for those of you that watch that are in this area. But what an impressive map just to see here, and it gives us context as to where the spring might go, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But as we play this forward, I do want to show you that when you watch out, let's actually get an update on this. There we go. Okay, when you watch where we expect snow to be added in this pattern, this has been a very, very tricky forecast. They're all tricky. I know guys like me say stuff like that. But while we had quite a bit of confidence in seeing the chances of getting good snow out of Montana into parts of North Dakota, but skimming here across parts of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario, the big question will be, starting early next week, you see this guy right here? There is this idea that we could get a system that could not only put the chances for snow, I mean, this is very low. This is the probability of 3 inches, and we're down here in the 10 to 30% range. But just thinking about the setup for what could be some snow across the central United States toward the Great Lakes and then into New England. There's a lot of New Englanders that are waiting on good snow, and I understand why. Let me pull this up here. If I just look up one of my favorite maps, this is the percent of normal snowfall so far this year, and we know that big sections of the country have been left out of the flow, still waiting to get the event that comes through. So as we kind of watch the forecast here, let's take this out 10 days. That's the probability over the next 10 days of grabbing 3 inches of snow from the European ensemble. It's critical that we use the ensemble here. Remember yesterday when I showed you how much the model-to-model runs have flip-flopped on things? I mean, it's as early as next week, early next week. It's not been consistent. And some of those models lately have painted a big New England coastal snowstorm. And I just want to be very tempered in the way we talk about it, given the lack of consistency model run to model run. And just to show you why it's been so inconsistent, here's the issue. We have 3 short waves to contend with. Here's the first one. That is the one that's going to produce a system that goes into the northern plains later today and tomorrow. Here's the second one that sneaks down to fill in this broader long wave. See the long wave here? And it's going to hit California. And then this is the third one right there that is actually going to zip through this whole pattern. And it's the one that combines as this long wave here ejects and moves east. So these features are so subtle, and the model's ability to be initialized with their exact position, kind of representing truth in the flow, I don't think it's good. And as a result, there's a lot of uncertainty with where this is going to go. So we can look at this a lot of different ways, but I want to now show it to you in terms of vorticity. So it's that vortmax, this vortmax, and this vortmax we're going to be watching. I wish I had the technology just to leave my drawings on there so you can keep an eye on all 3 of them together. But watch what happens as we work our way through Wednesday into Thursday. I'll kind of point them out. The lead wave opens here. So where are they now? There's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. And what this is doing is this is helping to deepen a low right in this area. So that's where our low will be throughout today, getting into tomorrow. And then as we play this on forward, this is Thursday getting into Friday. We're going to watch, we've watched these 2 pieces come in here. There's the lead wave out. Our first one is way over here. And as we play this into Saturday and Sunday, what we end up getting out of this by early next week is that the models have really gone to this high amplitude, positive tilted trough. So it's this guy right here. And the question is, where is this going to take a low pressure system? Now, if you just gave me a snapshot of this map, I'd say, okay, prepare for this area, especially right in through here, to be quite wet, possibly stormy. And we're just going to watch that wave pull toward the mid-Atlantic. Now, if we get by the day before Valentine's Day, not Halloween, if we get there and that guy is sitting like this, and there is some source of cold air, that's going to be tricky, then this is a monster. I mean, that would be a huge system right in that area. But I have such little confidence in knowing that that's where it's all going to end up. And again, it just comes back to the fact of how well were the models initialized with the position of these 3 waves. Okay, so let's take a look at all of it in the forecast. Early this morning, this is what our all hazards map looked like. So still more fog in places. Winter storm warnings out. That's this shade of color and through here, all throughout kind of the western mountains. Strong winds in New Mexico, Texas, even here in central Kansas. And because of that other little wave sneaking down here along the coast of California, we do have the risk of more snow getting added into the Sierra Nevada, and the flood threat continues in Southern California. Okay, from here, as we move forward, take a look at the high-res NAM this morning. Let's get this out here about 9 o'clock. Ready? We did have the risk of the mixed precip coming into Montana in this section of the Dakotas. But the snow through the Intermountain West, let's watch this system first here. And as it rolls out, it's going to be putting down some halfway decent snow into this section of North America. Rain out ahead of it. This has been very well realized by the models. It will be, I think, windy all through this area. Strong winds out of the south and out of the southwest. So they're kind of curling around this low, pretty tightly spaced isobars. But just keeping an eye on this one over the near term. This is through early Thursday morning, playing through Thursday afternoon and evening. And I'll just make a statement here that we could open up a corridor in through here where there are some isolated thunderstorms. So don't be surprised with the warmth that's coming in. We could get a little destabilization and some thunderstorm activity. I just think it's a possibility with this setup. So that low curls into Ontario, just north of Lake Superior. And let's go back, and I want to show you this system coming through California. So watch this tight little low right here. This is early this morning, playing through the middle of the day. This is why they have the winter storm advisories, and then down farther south, winter storm warnings. And that low curls up, delivering more heavy rain into California. And then it moves into this part of Arizona. So we could, up around Flagstaff here, add a whole lot more snow with this next little system that rolls through. Same thing for parts of the Colorado Rockies. And that's just the first two waves. We haven't even brought the third one in yet. That's the one that's currently in the Aleutian Islands. So to see that, let's kind of flip over to our GFS versus ECMWF on the right. So we've watched pretty carefully in the models here. This is through Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, and evening. Okay. As we let this play forward, getting into Friday, you'll see this. So we have one low here. There's a frontal boundary that's kind of right into there. And this will be where the next wave, which is sitting here, the upper level wave, which is sitting in this area, is going to try to eject out and ride that front, right in through there. You see, why will it ride the front? Well, there's high pressure on this side, high pressure on this side. That's the corridor through which it will want to go. It won't stay in that pressure trough. So we see here by Saturday evening, look at the snow coming out of the Four Corner states, the heavier rains across the Mid-South and Southeast. This is now getting into Sunday morning. Some of the models really dropping down some cold air in New Mexico and Texas. Not in GFS, but it's here in this current run of the European. This is Sunday afternoon, getting into Monday. System rolls up the East Coast. And you can see how both models are predicting this East Coast system here. But how that transition of snow happens on the backside, this is Monday, Tuesday, is going to be very, very challenging to forecast. There's a little clipper that sneaks into parts of Alberta and Saskatchewan here, and also probably clip in Montana, North Dakota early next week as well. But this will be the tricky system to forecast. Now, I want to show it to you one other way. How tightly spaced is the ensemble in predicting where it's going to go? Well, you can see how clear it is going out 36 hours where the European ensemble is placed in that low. It's going to live right there, almost going right over the top of the Red River of the North. Then sneaks into parts of Ontario, decent clustering. What we're going to watch after that, okay, here's the pressure trough I mentioned. This will be Saturday getting into Sunday. That next low, there it is, trying to merge pretty far to the south. And what we're going to see is by next Monday, well, this is really midnight Monday, pretty broad spread on where the low could be, but it is projecting to get somewhere in the mid-Atlantic. So you see, this is the spread we currently have in the forecast, which is why the ensemble snowfall forecast I started with doesn't to paint a really clear picture as to where the biggest snows are going to be from this. One thing we do see is that after this, there's high pressure that dives in, and that's your source of cold air we keep talking about arriving some point after Valentine's Day. Okay, so let's add up a couple of the model forecasts. Let's just look at the operational run of the Euro and play this out a week. We'll just pause it there for a second. Pretty consistent with the forecast, I think, from the GFS. I mean, overall, you look at that and I get some, you see some similarities. Where it will look different is on the snow side. This is adding up snow from the European model. Let's take that out a week. There we go. So look at what the European model is attempting to do. The GFS has this. It's different here in the Northern Plains. It's different on this second system. So we just need to weigh the two together and just look at the maps. Remember, all of these maps, because I do this quickly, they're all on agweather.com, ag-wx.com for free. You can go check them out. Let's look on the wetter and drier side of this. Who over the next 10 days has a low chance of adding up a lot of precip? Well, this is your chance of getting less than a half inch. So I'm kind of identifying a big section here of the central plains of the United States, western Corn Belt, sections of the upper Midwest. You still see down here in western Texas and then pockets throughout the Great Basin, less than a half inch. On the wetter side of it, the 6Z came in. Let's go back to the 0Z there, take you out to 10 days. There you go. Wetter side of it, highest probabilities of the wettest conditions are right in through here east of the Rockies. Take a look at Arizona. Man, we need this moisture in here. That's impressive. And we go ahead and step this up to 2. Look at that. Very wet in those areas over the next 10 days. Where does it end up after that? Well, what I've been talking about is ridging into Alaska, kind of ridging, trying to poke up in Scandinavia, and even in times into Greenland. But overall, we just keep taking this out, and you get out there to like February 20th, and while we have high pressure that's built back in these areas, okay, big areas of high pressure, well, let's just call this higher heights in these areas, we have just continued to force the subtropical jet to be the dominant piece. So if you look at the wind speeds out there, darn it, I got to do a run in. I apologize for that. Let's go way out here. You look at the wind speeds. It's all subtropical jet driven. So the consequence of that is that you end up getting all of your wettest conditions south. See, in all three models. So drier in the northwest, drier, big section here of the country. That's pretty consistent across the models. Sorry, I just hit the table. Did that make a thud for you? I think that's my problem. Sometimes I just rest my arm on the table, and now my new mic really picks it up well, so I'll be conscious of that. Okay, sorry for that quick diversion, but let's get into the temperatures. Another one today, very mild right here. Temperatures up to 30 degrees above average. That's Thursday's highs. Getting into Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Look at this playing forward in this week as the warmth spreads from the from the west toward the east. Now take a look at this though. We've been trying to figure out, when does this colder air, which has been poked out of Alaska, start to make its way into the lower 48? And now the day 5 through 10 is cooled off here, and the day 10 through 15 is showing cooler as well. So there's going to be this section of the country kind of right in through here into the southeast and east that does go colder as we get out there past the next 5 to 7 days. Now, remember, our big things we're watching are support from the tropics, because we know that the ridging across the Arctic is helping to displace some of that cold air. But the MJO just isn't moving. It's sitting here, and it's got to punch way out into this direction. You've seen me draw that now probably 20 times in the last 20 videos. If that would happen, we would start to get a different signal. But as it stands, it appears that more of the MJO is going to kind of go into null space and collapse a bit rather than give us a stronger signal into the future. So here we go, long range. This is what we've got for February 21st to March 21st. And as you look at this pattern of precipitation, we're like, all right, dry from parts of Texas, Mid-South, Midwest, Ohio Valley, wet here. I mean, Florida, how long has it been since you guys have seen the sun? You're expected to continue to stay wet. Wetter in the plains, which is desperately needed given my concern about what summer's going to be like in the plains and throughout the Intermountain West, but drier in the Northwest, and no, real strong signal in the Sierra Nevada to be wet either. Now we look at that and say, well, what's driving all of this? If we take a look at every El Nino event that would be classified as moderate or strong or very strong, and we look, this is April. Let's go back here. I'm sorry. We're still in the month of February into March. Let's go to March. If we look at every time that this has happened with an El Nino, which we have now, guess what we tend to get? We tend to get drier here, wetter in the southeast of Florida, wetter in the plains, and wetter into California. So you go back and say, why does the model look like that? This model is strongly being influenced by El Nino right now. That's all that's saying. That's what March has looked like with El Nino. Now, I want to be careful because you already saw what I showed for April. Let's just go back and have a look at it again. April, when there's a transitioning El Nino coming out of El Nino and fading toward neutral, you look at it and go, wow, there's a lot of areas that show up on the drier side of the spectrum, with only being maybe a little wetter here, here, and here. But I want to be very careful. April is typically a very wet month, and so when you see these values off, when you compare all of them historically by a half inch or so, I don't want anyone to look at this and go, oh wow, it's going to be a really, really dry April. This is not suggesting that. It's just kind of giving us an idea on the pattern. And I also want to remind you of something I made earlier. This was the graphic we showed on Monday. These are all of the years that went into the composite map I made, looking at March and April precipitation anomalies for moderate, strong, and very strong El Nino events since 1950. And I bring this back up just to illustrate how challenging April is going to be in the forecast. So while we may see a consistent picture with March, comparing the models to El Nino, I think April is going to be very challenging. I think April, it will be more about the MJO movement than it'll be about what's going on with El Nino, because MJO is stalled now, but it will break out at some point. From there, I want to show you that we also got new data from the National Multi-Model Ensemble, and I'm kind of going to build this up, and I believe either this Friday or on Monday, I'm going to put together kind of a summary of the new long-range model updates. But this is March, April, and May from the NMME. And what I found remarkable about this is that the NMME really just caved to what the European looked like. I will rephrase that. Its newest solution looks very much like the European. I don't want you to think that the models kind of have a personality here, which means that something has strongly forced the forecast from two entirely separate systems to look wetter in this area, drier here and here. Look at this. It's very consistent between the European March, April, May and the National Multi-Model Ensemble. So does that build confidence? It can, but they can both epically be wrong as well, which is why I just keep coming back to let you know that April is going to be a challenge to forecast, and I don't want to make a stab at it until I can have better evidence as where it's going to go. So let's finish this up with a bit of an international update. Global precipitation anomalies for the next 10 days. We've got heavy rains coming into parts of northern Australia, hitting Queensland, Northern Territory here. You can also see what we were mentioning throughout Europe being wetter, and you can see the U.S. distribution here. But I'm going to take you to South America. Across South America, this is kind of the last day of the heat. We've had this heat episode that's lasted, I think, a little more than 10 days. Some of those days getting up there around, upper 90s, lower 100s for afternoon highs. But this is the front that's coming through. There it is. Look at that front. That's by the 8th, and that just swipes on through, knocking the temperatures down. Now, I won't be able to tell you how much or if any damage happened to the Argentine crop. But what I can show you here is that when this comes through, it's going to bring in some rain. And it's a reminder that in Argentina, their planting windows, which means kind of their spacing of their crop as it goes through maturity throughout the year, is large. They have a 3-month planting window down here. And so this rain will be coming in and helping almost all of the crop, but how much of the crop was vulnerable to the heat, it's yet to be seen. But there's rain coming in. The drier spot over the next 10 days is primarily down here in southern Brazil, with normal rains kind of hitting the center west and northern and northeastern area. Just thinking about all of that, I do want to bring up again that April, May, and June in the newly released NMME, we showed it earlier this week in the European, it has also shown a bit of a drier signal here, which means the end of the monsoon may come a bit early. And this is a major concern for safrinha crops. And I also want to just point this out. I grabbed those same Aprils that we used in our analysis earlier, all the El Niños that were moderate, strong, or very strong. And again, we can see that this center-west region here tends to struggle with a long-lasting monsoon, which means the safrinha crop does have the risk of having the rains run out early. That's something we're going to have to watch carefully. So I'm going to leave you there. Thanks for hanging on for this whole video today, and we'll talk again tomorrow. Thanks.